Hello, everyone. I'm going to use this as an excuse to try out some new Armagnac. This is a Wayward Cask. I'm very excited. All right. If you've been following this little side channel so far, or even the main channel, really, you've probably noticed that politically speaking, I lean to the left, at least as far as the U.S. political spectrum goes these days, which has completely gone off the rails anyhow. But you might have also noticed that I don't spend a whole lot of time railing against capitalism, this, and profits, that, in the same way that other, online left commentators usually do. And that's because I think capitalism, which is very broadly some kind of system of regulated market competition among privately owned economic producers, there is a spectrum there. That can create a lot of social benefits. I have read that passage right at the start of The Wealth of Nations about the wool coat, about the extraordinary detailed layers of production that go into making the most basic of products. And I take seriously the market's potential for doing good. I've read My Smith. I've read a little bit of Ricardo, some Mill, some Hayek, definitely some kinds, along with my Marx, and along with a college econ class that taught me absolutely nothing in retrospect. That doesn't mean I reject the kind of socialism that, other folks on the left are talking about. To the contrary, a working market economy needs public institutions and a proactive state in the same way that a door needs hinges. You don't make the door better by taking the hinges off. You just make it not a door anymore. But the reason why I don't want to call myself like a market socialist or something is which would not be wrong. I mean, that would be a decent description. It's really because I'm petty, because I don't want to surrender whatever's left of the good name of market capitalism to the absolute freaking ghouls that have taken it over. Neoclassical libertarianism is the mask that vampires like to put on when they want to seem respectable. They point to high prices and record profits and say it's just the market equilibrium. They point to crappy jobs and low wages for most workers and then huge bonuses for the executives and say it's just marginal productivity doing its work. They look at most of the money going back to the people who barely work and say it's just maximizing stockholder value. I want to keep calling myself a capitalist of some kind, if only to seize the word back from those goddamn people. Somewhere or other, Sam Cedar said, and I cannot find the video. I swear it exists, though. He said the problem, strictly speaking, isn't capitalism. It's oligarchy. Sorry. This is good. It's oligarchy. And I think that is absolutely spot on. There are a lot of ways to get to oligarchy, and capitalism eating itself is one very big one. But it's not essential to capitalism. There absolutely are essential problems with capitalism, and it's the job of the state to correct for those problems. Waste, boom and bust cycles, ecological costs, on and on and on. Above all, the tendency towards market concentration. If you've ever actually been in, a literal market, they're still out there. It's not just a freaking metaphor for whatever the hell is going on in Wall Street. If you've actually been in an actual physical market, in certain parts of Europe, Turkey, Mexico, so on, or if you've really ever worked in an actual small business, you're probably aware that market competition is an absolute pain in the ass. It's an endless hustle. It's countless little projects to get the customers in. Constant, fact-finding missions to learn what the next shop over is doing, on and on and on, so that the eternal dream of the capitalist their eternal dream is always to kind of eventually evolve into some kind of feudal lord. The dream is just to lay back, have some, girls feed you wine and grapes all day and just have, enormous amounts of money roll in without having to do any competition stuff or having any need to get up and work. And that dream can never be allowed to happen. I mean, in some extended sense, it can never happen because, I mean, at least not that like they hope, because feudal lords are, psychologically speaking, perpetually unhappy. They constantly fear losing what they have. They can trust no one by their nature. They can't even really enjoy the grape girls because one of them might slit their throat at any moment. But if not, back to my point, if not constantly checked by labor power, by real competition, and eventually by the state, they will endlessly try to achieve that dream to the nth degree, to the ruin of the market and of society. So let's talk about NASCAR. Maybe I should have picked something American for this. Oh, well. NASCAR. Now, I don't personally like NASCAR very much. I think I've actually watched exactly one race to the end. And that was only because I really love my granddad. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to take it. And as a Chicago resident, I have a personal grudge because once a year, they shut down my goddamn highway, plus a few blocks of downtown for a few days so that they can do street racing, even though the city's otherwise been decidedly against street racing. But I guess it's okay when the moonshine runner people do it. On the other hand, NASCAR does provide a very good lesson in how capitalism should work, if it's actually going to be capitalism. With NASCAR, you come for the race. That's the main thing. That's what people enjoy. Well, not me, but other people. The race, lots of cars competing with each other, taking risks, trying to find better angles, everyone making moves to try to get a little bit ahead of the next couple of cars up. And the same with the market. I mean, we'll carry on this comparison for a while. It's the competition, the endless game of developing and producing better products in whatever form that may be to sell at lower prices, the complex network of signaling, where there should be more and where there should be less. All of this should benefit not only the consumers and the capitalists, but also everyone else involved. The suppliers, the kind of auxiliary businesses, and the workers, especially the workers. NASCAR is a spectacle, and that's where it derives its value from. Capitalism is the production of new wealth. That is what it is. But in NASCAR, even if people come to see the race and the cars from, all the various teams going around and around and around, the cars and the teams cannot be the only parties involved to have a race. In order for there to be a race, you need a neutral third party to maintain, if not necessarily own the track, and keep it in drivable condition. You need a third party to make sure the stands and the other needs of the spectators are in good order. You need them to establish rules and regulations for the sake of fairness and safety and the public good. So, the switch to unleaded gasoline is a good case in point. I just realized maybe we shouldn't be kicking up lead into the air while people are watching. And to enforce those regulations, they should be doing that, enforcing regulations, and to even intervene in the race as needed, using their best judgment whenever issues come up. And occasionally, they can even begin new initiatives that might benefit the future of the racing. Without such a third party, in this case, NASCAR LLC mainly, although there's some other players in there. Without them playing that role, even though it is itself not a participant, there can be no race. And market capitalism has its own equivalent third party, and it has to. Libertarianism it's just a bunch of bullshit. It has its own third party, namely the state. And it is the job of the state to make sure that the market works and that it doesn't break down. It creates and guarantees the currency that is the primary means of exchange. It establishes and enforces standards. It establishes and enforces rules of fairness and public safety. It steps in, and it has to step in when something is going wrong or where the market isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. And it endlessly pumps in public goods, infrastructure, but above all, the elements of basic guaranteed standard of living. It pumps those public goods into the foundation of the economy at cost. That is their job. And so far, like, all this sounds pretty normal, and you could be talking about any sport, not just NASCAR. But there is one thing that makes NASCAR special. One thing about NASCAR that I really absolutely love. Because at some point, during a NASCAR race, after the 4 or 5, days, I guess the things usually take, someone has to win. Someone will cross the finish line first. And same thing in the market. Give a market long enough, and someone will establish dominance, eventually. And they may even do it without cheating. Someone will make the best, cheapest pastries in an area. They'll do the best, cheapest car washes. Sell the best, cheapest phones or whatever, such that no one else is in any real position to compete any longer in that arena. In capitalism, you can even have ties. You can have basically market sharing between several large producers who just kind of explicitly or implicitly decide to stop competing and just dominate together. And that's different from NASCAR. Ties can't happen in NASCAR, not just because like photo finishes have gotten so good, but because if there really is a tie at the finish, you can't determine from the photo. You can just go back and count laps. Go see who led the most laps. So that is a difference. There are no ties in NASCAR, but I don't care. It doesn't matter for my point. At any rate, at some point, the game, the competition ends, and you have a winner. What happens at the end of a NASCAR race when someone wins? What happens when someone wins? The crowd, cheers. The winning team celebrates. The car does some burnouts and some donuts and all that stuff. You get victory lane. You get lots of photos, champagne, interviews, fame and celebration. I'm sure there's some drugs involved. It's a huge achievement to win a race. It's an achievement for the whole team, and they will go straight into the history books. Good for them. And then, while all this is going on, the winning car, the car that took that team past the finish line and established victory, that car is rolled off into third-party garages to be dismantled. The point of this in NASCAR is to check for cheating, like technical infractions. But the lesson to take is that the winning car is taken apart piece by piece. The team that drove that car will get back a bunch of those pieces. They may even try to construct some other car out of it. But that car, the car that won, that car will never race again. And market capitalism, if it's to continue functioning, also has to do this. Just by the nature of what it is. When a producer or a group of producers wins the market, establishes dominance, it's the job of the state to break that dominance. Realistically, I don't know if there's ever been a case of market dominance, at least in this country, that hasn't involved at least a little bit of cheating. But even if there hasn't, even if they did this honestly, came up with the best product at the cheapest price, the winner still has to be dealt with. Depending on the case, we break them up, as we did with Standard Oil and the Bell system back in the day. Or perhaps we take their approaches, their technologies, we make them public so the competition can catch up. Or we just make them stay controlled altogether. We take their functions and we put them under state command. And just remove whatever the hell they were doing from market competition altogether. If there really hasn't been any cheating, which is unlikely, but let's present that as a logical possibility, at least in capitalism, then of course the team involved in the successful companies, from leadership on down to the janitors, they should be celebrated for their accomplishment. You made the best product. We all benefit from that. Congratulations. You won capitalism. Good for you. They should get parties. They should get champagne. They should get a book tour. They should get speaking fees. They should get drugs, sure. And they should get a really cushy retirement wherever they want, or maybe the chance to go work for another company of their choosing. Maybe even like a smaller chunk of the same company they were previously at. Or just like starting again from the ground. Whatever they want to do, sure. But that company, or those companies that reached market dominance, That cannot continue as it was, for reasons more fundamental than NASCAR's need to check for technical violations. There are deeper reasons than that, because the market that has been won by one producer or group isn't a market anymore, by definition. So to go back to NASCAR, imagine if a bunch of economists came and convinced the NASCAR folks that dismantling the winning cars is bad, actually. And then, come up with your own, imagine a mathematical model, come up with your own. Racing efficiency would be improved without that, kind of third-party interference. Sure, everyone goes with that. So you race again, and let's say a car from the Toyota team wins. And in accordance with the new, libertarian non-interference rules, that car remains intact. But in this world, another rule, in this world, sort of capitalism is racing, if you like. The car that's won before, it's always going to have an insurmountable edge over the others, or nearly insurmountable. And so you're going to see, statistically speaking, that same Toyota win the next race, and the next, and the next. And then the other Toyotas from the same team mysteriously also start winning the other spots at the podium. The Toyota team then uses their winnings to simply capture the decision makers. They capture the third party. And they start getting the rules changed even more in their favor. And then the winning team just starts buying out all the other teams. Why not? The fans might root for different cars or drivers, but it's all the same people. So that, strictly speaking, you don't have a race anymore. And eventually the fans would start to get disgusted by all of this, but by that point, they would find that there's no longer any alternative. All the other racing sports, all the other comparable sports, they've also all been bought out by this one team. So there is no more fairness. Safety becomes a total afterthought. The stands are going to start decaying and falling apart because the Toyota team doesn't want to waste money on maintenance. The race basically just becomes a procession of, 40 of the same goddamn cars with different paint jobs driven by, I don't know, whoever gets into them, ghouls and robots, nepotism babies. You no longer have a race at all. The race is dead. It's been killed by the car that won it because you didn't break it down. Anyways, that is what you would see happening if you kind of took the analogy in the other direction. But back in the world of American market capitalism, we've been seeing the equivalent of that scenario play out in slow motion over the last, 4 or 5 decades. The last time a monopoly was really broken up was the Bell system under AT&T. That finally happened in the early 80s, but it was in the making since the Nixon years. And then, even after we broke up the Bell system, a decade later, under Bill Clinton, thanks, Bubba, all those companies were just allowed to start merging again. And here we are today with basically a telecommunications oligopoly split between, mostly Verizon and AT&T again. It's exactly the same in practically every other sector. Fairly or unfairly, the largest companies in the history of the world, they have won. They have won capitalism. They have won the market. And if we want the market to go on, we should follow the example of NASCAR. We have to dismantle the winners. Thank you for watching, and go with God.